For a long time now, fertility science has been tackling a really difficult challenge. How do you help families avoid passing on serious genetic diseases to their kids? Well, today, we're exploring a technology that gives a pretty revolutionary answer to that question, offering a whole new kind of hope before pregnancy even starts.
I mean, just think about that question for a second. It sounds like something straight out of science fiction, doesn't it? How can you possibly look at the entire genetic code of an embryo that's just a tiny cluster of cells and do it to make sure it's healthy before a pregnancy even begins? Well, believe it or not, that's the central mystery we're going to solve today. So to really get this, you have to put yourself in the shoes of these parents. For couples who know they carry a high risk of passing on a serious inherited condition, the road to having a family can be just filled with anxiety. They often face this absolutely heart-wrenching decision after they're already pregnant. But what if that decision could be made much, much earlier? And that's exactly where this technology called pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, or PGD, comes into play. You can basically think of it as a totally different approach to prenatal testing. Instead of testing a fetus that's already growing in the womb, PGD lets scientists test an embryo while it's still in the lab. Right, and this is the crucial point. The number one reason families go down this path is to completely sidestep the issue of having to consider pregnancy termination. It doesn't matter if it's for personal, ethical, or religious reasons. PGD gives them a way to select a healthy embryo from the very, very beginning. It's a proactive solution to what is an unbelievably tough emotional challenge. Now, PGD has actually been around for more than 2 decades, but the original methods, well, they worked, but they were far from perfect. Let's take a quick look at how things used to be done. Okay, so the whole thing always kicks off with an IVF cycle to create several embryos. These little guys grow in the lab for a few days, and then an embryologist comes in to do this incredibly delicate biopsy, removing a tiny bit of genetic material to test. Based on those results, a healthy, unaffected embryo is chosen and transferred back to the uterus. And the biopsy technique itself has changed a ton. Originally, they did it on day 3, taking just one single cell. But pretty quickly, the whole field shifted to doing it on day 5. So why the change? Well, because by day 5, the embryo is way more robust. The risk of damage is a lot lower. And this is a big one. Scientists can get about 5 cells to work with. That's a luxury that makes the genetic test so much more reliable. But here's where the problems were. The old PGD was just incredibly labor-intensive. You had to build a custom test from scratch for every single family. That process could take months, and you guessed it, added a lot to the cost. Plus, there was a real risk of error, and maybe most importantly, it was completely blind to other huge genetic problems, like having the wrong number of chromosomes. And this is where the story really takes a sharp turn. All those limitations with the old way created this huge demand for something better, faster, and way more comprehensive. And that's when karyomapping stepped onto the scene. Karyomapping is a totally different way of thinking about the problem. Instead of hunting for one single genetic typo, it looks for a much bigger clue. It finds this unique DNA fingerprint on the piece of the chromosome that carries the bad gene, and then it just tracks which embryos inherit that specific fingerprint. It's so much smarter. And this analogy just illustrates it perfectly. Imagine the old PGD was like trying to find one tiny spelling mistake in a 1,000-page novel. It's tedious, it's slow, and you might even miss it. Karyomapping, that's like knowing the book with the typo always has a bright red cover. You don't have to read the book, you just look for the red cover. It's just a faster, more elegant way to find the chromosome you're worried about. So what did all this actually mean in the real world? Well, the improvements weren't just small tweaks. They were absolutely dramatic, and they changed the entire experience for patients. Just look at this side by side. The prep time? It dropped from months, sometimes even a whole year, down to just a couple of weeks. Wow. Accuracy got even better, taking up to over 99%. But honestly, the real game changer is that last row. Karyomapping could check for chromosome abnormalities at the same time, something the old method just couldn't do at all. And that brings up a really important question. Why does checking for the right number of chromosomes matter so much in IVF? Well, this condition, having the wrong number, is called aneuploidy. And it turns out, it's the key to understanding why so many IVF cycles fail. It's because having the wrong number of chromosomes is the single biggest reason for IVF failure and miscarriage. And as you can see from this chart, the rate just skyrockets with maternal age. For a woman in her mid-20s, maybe a quarter of her embryos are abnormal. By her late 30s, that's up to half.
And for women over 40, it's a staggering 3/4 or even more.
So what happens when you can screen those embryos out before transfer? Well, the impact on miscarriage rates is just profound. You'd normally expect a 15 to 20% miscarriage rate in this group, but with karyomapping, because you're avoiding the abnormal embryos, that rate plummets to just 5%. That is incredible.
And this is what it all leads to. If you can find a healthy embryo, one that's free of the disease and has the correct number of chromosomes, the chance of that one single embryo resulting in a healthy baby is almost 70%. Let that sink in. That's a truly remarkable success rate. But the story doesn't actually end there. Karyomapping isn't just a clinical tool. It has also turned into this amazing engine for scientific discovery, giving us a peek into the very, very beginning of human life. Seriously, by looking at the genetic data from thousands of these tiny, 5-day-old embryos, scientists are learning these fundamental truths about our own biology that were just completely hidden from us before.
For instance, we now know that the vast majority of chromosome errors, we're talking more than 85%, actually come from the egg. We've also learned that the very first cell divisions after fertilization are kind of genetically chaotic, and chromosome breakage is way more common than anyone thought. And get this, the data even suggests that different IVF lab environments might actually affect how genetically stable an embryo is.
And all this leads to a conclusion that really flips everything we thought we knew on its head. It's captured perfectly in this quote from Dr. Dagan Wells, one of the pioneers in this field. He says that the fertility decline that comes with age, it isn't really about the quality of the embryos themselves. If you can find a chromosomally normal embryo, its chances are just as good whether it came from a 22-year-old or a 42-year-old. The challenge for older women isn't making good embryos, it's finding them. Karyomapping has completely revolutionized genetic testing in IVF. It's made the path to parenthood safer and more successful for so many families. But it's also opened this incredible new window into the very beginning of human biology. And as we get better and better at reading the blueprint of life's first moments, it leaves us with a pretty profound question. What comes next? And what new challenges and responsibilities will we face on this incredible scientific frontier?